Do you find that when it comes to the holidays, by the time people arrive at your house, you're so exhausted from cooking all day that you can't even enjoy visiting with them?
Yes, I have had that experience, and it's getting better.
Because we have a solution for you today, and this can take your Thanksgiving or Christmas to a whole new level. Because today we are going to teach you how to make your side dishes ahead so that the day of, all you're doing is pulling these out of the freezer and heating them up. There's no chopping. No. There's not even any grocery shopping. You are just going to take these that today you or next week you made well ahead of the holidays and throw them into your oven, to your slow cooker, and dinner is going to be ready. Now, you might have to still worry about the turkey or the ham or although we do have a Meg Ed ham recipe, so you could always use that. Anyway, stick with us because we are about to make your holidays a whole lot easier.
And so we have been working on this kind of process for a while because it is important to us. We're Canadian, we had our Thanksgiving already. So it was important for us to have it all ready to go, partly so we could share it with you, partly so we could enjoy it ourselves.
Yes. And there's this one recipe that Christy has been making for holidays for years and years, and we've kind of talked about it before, like, do you think it could be a freezer meal? Because it's one of those ones that you have to have at every holiday dinner.
We have to. It's a butternut squash casserole. My mother-in-law has been making it for I don't know how long. I've always had it, and it just feels wrong if we have one of our family dinners and it isn't there.
It doesn't feel like the holidays without it.
It doesn't feel like the holidays unless we have it.
And that's how I feel about my sweet potato casserole, which we'll get to in a minute. But first, I want to let Christy tell you about how she has been experimenting with this butternut squash casserole and getting it ready for you so you can use it.
Right. So it is butternut squash. It's a custard. There's eggs in it, there's butter, and I'll get to the recipe here in a sec. But I wasn't sure you could freeze it, and I wasn't sure at what point you should freeze it. Do we freeze it before we bake it in the oven? Do we only freeze it after it's been baked? What would happen if I roasted the butternut squash for like extra, we have a carrot soup recipe, which is my favorite soup one of my favorites. They're all good soups, but this one is super delicious. And you roast the carrots to the point where they start to get crispy. They get that bit of char on it and it just enhances the flavor so much, right? So I thought, I'm gonna do that with the butternut squash casserole because I'm pretty sure that my mother-in-law just either boils it or steams it and it could be way fancier. So I did it. I got 2 butternut squashes, I peeled them, chopped them, which isn't easy. Like, they're a pain, which is partly why this is a treat. But I roasted them and they reduced by half. Like, I started out with 8 cups, I came out with 4 cups. I made the recipe and it was so rich. It was too butternutty. Like, I think I ruined it.
The roasting made it sort of inedible.
It was so intense, it was too much. There was 2 parts wrong with that one. One, I had bought the butternut squash without realizing that I didn't have Rice Krispies, and that's part of the topping. And so I'm like looking around my house thinking, what else can I use? So I Googled it. I'm like, what can you use instead of Rice Krispies when you're baking? Google, in all its wisdom, suggested that pretzels might be, like chopped up pretzels, might be one of the things in terms of crunch.
Okay, but that's a totally different flavor profile, and that has the salt in it.
Well, I thought the salt might make it interesting.
Okay.
Because it's with like brown sugar and pecans, a little bit of salt, it could make it interesting. It was a fail. It was a fail. It was a fail. So I had this extra rich, super intense butternut squash with this pretzels topping that was just bleh. So I'm like, I have to try this again now because now I'm determined. So I did. I just boiled the butternut squash like you do on the farm, and it was perfect. It didn't reduce to the point of being so intense that it was inedible, and I went and got some Rice Krispies. Actually, that's not entirely true. I got the store brand, so it is crispy rice, and my kids were like, Mom, what is crispy rice? Where's the Rice Krispies? And I'm like, listen, cereal's expensive right now. Have you looked at cereal? So I topped it with crispy rice, and it worked. It was perfect. So then the next thing was, can I freeze this? At what point do I freeze this? So I will get to the recipe right now, and then I'm going to tell you the real kicker of this whole thing. So start by peeling and chopping and seeding your butternut squash. You want about 4 cups. So like butternut squash, right? Like sometimes they're huge. I had ordered 2 in my grocery order, and there was only 1 that showed up on my email. And so I thought, oh, are they out? Like, that's weird. And it was actually the grocery manager that loaded my car when he came out, and he goes, you'll see that we only had 1 butternut squash for you, and you'll see why. And it was massive. It was like this big. And I'm like, oh, that makes total sense. Yes. I'm glad that they used some brains when they were putting my order together, because I didn't need 2 of these. And so really, I just needed the 4 cups. I made it twice though, so I had enough for 8. I boiled it, and it mashed really nicely with just the masher. You add in 4 eggs. Okay, so this has to be cooled, right? I did it the day before, so it was totally cool. Otherwise, your eggs are gonna start to cook. You don't want that. So you add in your eggs, you add in a little bit of sugar, I used a fairly solid butter, not softened, so that it still stayed chunky throughout the mashing process, because it gives flavor and also gives lift throughout your custard when it is done. So then we're also going to add in some evaporated milk and a little bit of salt. Mix that all together. You can just mix that with your masher. You could get out your KitchenAid and whirl it around in there. You could do it in your blender if that's what you have on hand, but I just used the masher. It was soft enough to just mash up nicely. So at this point, I'm like, can I just freeze this, or do I have to cook it first? So I froze one and I cooked one. So I did. I put it in a bag. I sealed it up. The topping I did for both of them. I did it separately. The topping has pecans, some brown sugar, a little bit of melted butter, and your Rice Krispies. Crush them a little bit so that they're not super chunky in a bag. And I mixed it all together and let it cool and put it in a medium-sized bag. So I stapled it to the custard that was uncooked and froze it. The other custard I cooked. I put it right in the oven. So you want to cook it for about 40 minutes at about 350. And I don't know if you're familiar with cooking custards. It'd be like cooking pumpkin pie or something like that. Just when the center starts to get wiggly, like it's not soupy anymore, it just has a bit of a jiggle. I know that's a real technical term, but it took about 40 minutes. That's when I knew that it was going to be done soon. So you can add the topping right then, or you can save it back. You can let it finish cooking and freeze it and then add the topping on the day you do a reheat. But you can add, if you're cooking it from scratch, you would add your topping on right then, give it another 10 minutes. You know custard is cooked properly when you insert a knife and it comes out clean. I don't know why it's not a toothpick like it is with cake. My mom used a knife, so I use a knife.
That's the way those things go.
You know how that goes. So the custard does freeze on its own. You can add the topping right then, or you can add the topping on the day of cooking. If you have frozen the uncooked custard, you let it thaw, put it in, it's like a 9x13 casserole dish, like a cake pan, and bake it just like I said, 350 for about 45 minutes until you just start to get that jiggle, and it's just about cooked. Add your topping, finish cooking it for another 10 or 15 minutes until your knife comes out clean, let it set, and voila, you can eat. So we had this for Thanksgiving. I was hosting Thanksgiving. Sorry this is becoming such a long story, but those of you who are with me have been with me before, you know me. We sit down and we eat, and it is so delicious. We're enjoying this. It's Thanksgiving because I got this great dish. I even asked my mother-in-law, make this other thing that we never have anymore because you don't, like, because you always make the butternut squash. Can you make, it's a cottage cheese wrapped in crepes and then sprinkled with cream and stuff.
Nalishnika.
Yes, yes. I don't like it, but that's okay.
I do.
It's a texture thing for me.
Yeah.
The dry curd cottage cheese is for me. So we are enjoying it, and I started to tell my mother-in-law all of the things that I had to do to get this ready for freezer meals. Do you see how hard I work for you? And You are going to die laughing. She's like, oh yeah, you can totally freeze it when it's still raw. I could have just asked her.
So a phone call would have saved
A phone call would have saved me. Now, I still did the roasting thing, and my brother-in-law was like, oh yeah, that would totally be too intense. I can see why that would be like that. And so I'm still glad I went through the process. And I am somebody, I like to know things for myself, but she's like, oh yeah, you can freeze that, no problem.
And so now we are finally able to bring you Christy's mother-in-law's butternut squash casserole.
Which it is good. I have shared it in our Facebook group before. I've just taken a picture of the card and shared it when I've talked about it. But this is one that will actually probably end up in the club, especially now that I've nailed down the details on, because her recipe was sort of loose. Well, if you have 3 cups of butternut squash, you make it like this. And if you have 6 cups, then you make it like this. And so I've narrowed it down to something that'll work universally for everybody.
In this video, we're trying to share different recipes than we shared last year, but there are a few that we have to just share universally because you have to have stuffing or dressing and you have to have mashed potatoes,
of course,
in my opinion, for a holiday dinner. So we are going to be sharing our recipes for those because you need them. But one of the ones that we wanted to share that is a new one, it's not new to us, but it's new to these holiday side dish videos, is our jalapeno corn casserole. The reason that I think this is especially great is that you can do it in your slow cooker. And oftentimes when you do a holiday meal, your oven is taken.
Right.
And so it's really nice to have something that you can do in a slow cooker. This is also nice for bringing to someone else's house who's hosting because you just take your slow cooker with you and then you're not asking them if you can use their oven, which is probably in use. So into your large freezer bag, you're going to add a whole whack of frozen kernel corn, some cream cheese. We like to cube our cream cheese, just it mixes better in the bag and melts quicker in your slow cooker, so we just cube it before we add it in there. Then you're gonna add some grated cheddar cheese, a jalapeno that's finely diced. Now, if you like things spicier and you know that your guests do too, then you can leave the seeds and membrane in there. If you want it less spicy, then you want to take out the seeds and membrane because that's where the spice comes in. Then you're going to add some butter, heavy cream, and salt and pepper. You're going to take out as much air as you can from your freezer bag because when you're freezer cooking, air is what causes your freezer burn. So we're just going to be as careful as we can on that and get these to last a little bit longer in the freezer. Then you're gonna seal it and freeze it. And on the day you go to cook this, it could not be easier. You're going to thaw it or even just partially thaw it and then dump the contents of that large bag into your slow cooker and cook it on low. You can stir it partway through just to make sure that everything is all combined. And then you have a really great side dish that stretches. Now we need to get to my side dish experiment. And
yes,
I think this video is going to give you a little bit of behind the scenes insight into sort of what we go through to try to make things so that for you, they are the best they can possibly be and so that they are completely tried and tested. We don't want to be having you make the freezer mishaps. We would rather make them ourselves. So in our last mega session where we make 3 months of meals at a time, I'm gonna pop a video for that right there. We went ahead and my daughter was doing some of our prep for us, which is why I did it at that time, because she was peeling and cubing all these vegetables for me, and that's a lot nicer than me doing it myself. Don't worry, I did pay her. Not that you have to pay your children, but in this case, we were doing like a lot of prep. Like she did 6.5 hours of prep for us. So in that case, it's a little more than just saying, hey, can you peel and chop a few carrots for me? Anyway, so what we did is 2 experiments for these side dishes. One was a roasted root vegetables dish that I make all the time, but I've never tried to make it ahead and freeze it. And so we went ahead and made that into a freezer bag, got it in the freezer, and then waited a week because I wanted to just be sure that we're, you know, it's fully frozen and you're getting the full experience here. And then took it out, thawed it, and cooked it. Now I cooked it 2 ways. I cooked half of it just on a parchment lined cookie sheet, and I cooked the other half in a foil packet because that's often how I do this when I cook it up fresh. And I just wanted to see which would be better and, you know, if it would make a difference. And it was bad. It totally
It was a
flopped.
fail. Yeah.
Some of the vegetables just had too high a water content. Some of them just cooked at too different of a temperature. And all in all, it was a fail. So yes, I mean, the sweet potatoes cooked up great, and we know that from freezer cooking. The butternut squash cooked up great, as we know from even this video. And the carrots and onion
Totally
did great.
fine.
The zucchini, it does in lots of our other recipes do beautifully.
Especially if it's something that has a lot of sauce, because then
Yes.
it's soupy anyway, because it can get watery.
It can get watery. And in this case, it was watery, but also it cooked it at like faster than the other vegetables did. And so it was just wrong. But the rutabaga, no. And I love
That
rutabaga,
surprised me
so
when
I
you
was surprised.
Yeah, when you told me that, because I thought for sure it would be something like we grew up on the
Similar to-
farm. We thought it would be like the sweet potato.
Right, but I think it's a little closer to a potato where you don't really want to freeze raw potatoes. You can freeze cooked potatoes just fine, which we're going to get to in the garlic mashed potatoes, but not raw potatoes. So the purple turnips did not do well, and the parsnips did not do well. So all in all, complete failure.
I wonder if blanching or parboiling might have helped.
Totally, yes.
Yeah, so it might be worth, maybe next year we can revisit it with.
But for now, the roasted root vegetables is going to be one that I'm either not going to make for the holidays or I'm going to have to make up the day of. But let's face it, I'm not going to make it because I've got all these other great side dishes,
Right.
including the next one, which was an experiment that worked. Thankfully.
Yay!
The reason I'm so excited about this is it's beets. And I love beets more than I even love that root vegetable recipe that I was just talking about. They're so good, and especially when they're roasted. So again, when we were doing that mega session of freezer meals, we peeled and cubed, my daughter peeled and like coarsely cubed some beets. And when she and I were at the store, they had candy cane beets, they had golden beets, and they had regular beets. So I got all 3 kinds, mixed them together. They looked so beautiful. But in the end, they all kind of turned out to be the same color because the regular
Beets
colored them. So here's the thing. When I tell you about this recipe, you're gonna think, well, this is so simple. Why don't I just make it the day of? But first of all, beets, your hands will be the color of my shirt if you make these on Thanksgiving or Christmas. And do you really want to be like shaking people's hands and like talking to people when your hands are that color? Not really. And also it saves you possibly having to go to the store to get the beets, and it saves you having to peel and chop and, you know, have the ingredients. So even though, yeah, there's not much going on in this bag, it's going to be so much nicer to just have it already done in your freezer, be able to just roast it that day and not have to think about anything that you need to buy ahead or make ahead.
Another big reason that you would want to do that one specifically ahead is because when you were at the store, you said to the cashier, I haven't seen candy cane beets in forever. And she said, I'm surprised we even have them this late.
Yes. So I have candy cane beets in my freezer, although, like I said, you can't really tell because they mixed in with the other beets and whatever.
A solution, I mean, it's extra bags, but a solution would be to
put them in their
own bags. You really could do that.
But this is something where even if beets are out of season, you can still have them because you froze them months ago. So, on to our recipe. You're going to take your peeled beets that are cut in half or quarters, depending on the size of the beet, and just toss them all in a large freezer bag. You're gonna throw in a splash of olive oil, some salt and pepper, and give that a shake to coat all the beets. You're gonna get out as much air as you can, seal it, and freeze it. That is it. On the day you go to make this, which could be a holiday or could just be a nice Sunday dinner, you just thaw it. And honestly, when I cooked mine, they weren't even fully thawed. You can toss all your bag contents onto a parchment paper lined cookie sheet and roast these in the oven. You're gonna do about 400 degrees until they're fork tender. That's it. The only problem with these was that they got colored by the other beets, and as Christy said, you could solve that problem pretty easily, but they are delicious, easy, and now you've got another holiday side dish in your freezer.
Excellent. This next recipe is one of the ones we've done before, but it is something that you definitely need in your freezer for the holidays. It is garlic mashed potatoes. Like Charlotte said before, raw potatoes don't really freeze all that well. They get mealy and watery and the texture isn't nice and they can go black on you. Cooked potatoes freeze beautifully. In your pot, you are going to peel and cook a lot of potatoes. Now, this is something that you are going to want to double because you will want this for Thanksgiving, but you're going to have them again at Christmas too, so you might as well double them up now and get them ready for both. Once your potatoes are cooked, you are going to mash the softened potatoes and add in little bits of butter as you go. And then you're going to stir in sour cream, garlic, chives, salt, and pepper. Now, we use just garlic from a jar because honestly, we go through so much of it. It is easier to get minced garlic that way, and it works really well. And you're going to just really mix these until they're well incorporated and they're nice and soft. You can transfer them into a large freezer bag, get out as much air as you can, seal it up. Allow it to cool, please, before you put it into your bag. We don't want to wreck your bag, and you don't want that condensation inside there because that is also going to cause frost and potentially freezer burn down the road. Get it into your freezer, and then on the day of cooking, a lot of people struggle with reconstituting the mashed potatoes. Like once they're thawed, put them, you can do them in the oven, you can do them in the slow cooker, you can do them on stovetop. The key is to do them low and slow. Take your time with them. If it seems like they're still a little bit watery, just give it more time. A little more time, maybe a little more heat. Keep stirring every once in a while, and I promise you they will come back to being nice, fluffy mashed potatoes.
Yes, we've had a few people that have, some people, love them, make them all the time. They're especially good if you're making individual dinners and you're doing sort of that TV dinner style. I'll pop a video right there of some of those. But they can be great because you can just spoon them right in there and you've got your individual servings of them. But we've got a few people who have tried them who've said they're watery. And yes, they are, unless you continue to cook them and stir them here and there. And then you'll get the right texture.
Yes.
Okay, so mashed potatoes would not really be mashed potatoes without gravy, but my make-ahead gravy is a little bit complicated. So all I'm gonna do is pop a link right up there, and it'll be in the description in this video down below so that you can see how I make my make-ahead gravy. It's a little bit of a labor of love.
Sure.
And there's probably easier ways to do it, but gravy is one of those tricky things because when you have flour or cornstarch in something and then freeze it, it can separate when you thaw it. So it's like when you find one that works to make ahead, you really need to stick with that one. So this is my answer to that. But like I said, you've got your chicken wings that you cook and then you squish everything.
It's a big one.
Vegetables, and it's very flavorful, but
it's also very complicated.
Yes.
For me, I find it not a hardship to make gravy on the fly.
Yes.
And if I'm doing so many other things ahead, having the gravy for the day of, for me, isn't a big deal. But if you do have a million things on the go, that gravy is going to be so nice to have in your freezer. So it's worth.
And half the time, I would say half the years for Christmas, I have my make-ahead gravy in the freezer, and the other half the years, I use a packet. So I'm like, one or the other, like the extremes, right? I'm either working for hours to make this complicated make-ahead gravy, you know, weeks or months before, but still, I did it. Or I'm opening a packet. So
at the end of the day, you have gravy either way. It's all good.
So another thing that you can put that gravy on, of course, is your stuffing. And in last year's video, we showed you Christy's stuffing and my stuffing.
And I'm gonna laugh because I got roasted pretty hard for it because it's just white bread. And yes, I could use other kinds of bread, but I just made the one that my mom made and it was good. Now, I still want to try people in the South. They're like, it's not stuffing unless it's made with cornbread.
Right.
So I do want to try the cornbread stuffing. Somebody asked me in the Facebook group, Christy, did you make cornbread stuffing for Thanksgiving this year? And I'm like, I forgot. Okay, when Christmas comes, you have to remind me. I'm going to make the cornbread stuffing and I will report back.
So my stuffing is hardly different than Christy's, but I'm going to share it today anyway because I think it's the best stuffing. And it's pretty good. I like the look of it only because I use a dark rye bread and a white bread, and so you get the contrast of colors. And you get a little bit of a flavor difference between the rye and the white, but it's not a huge thing. So whatever kind of bread you want to use, you go ahead and do your favorites. So you're going to slice your loaves of bread, cube them. I like to get them thick sliced at the store, and so they're a little bit of a bigger cube, but you know, whatever you want. Then I season them with some salt, pepper, oregano, sage, and rosemary. I toss that on the breadcrumbs and I bake them in the oven at like 225, 250 until they are dried out. Alternately, you could leave them out on your counter for a few nights, but I have cats and so that is not wise.
I do it, but I put them in a cupboard that I can close it and it's not so bad. And I just do it for one night. Yes, if you have cats, you might change how you want to do that. And
if you've watched our videos with the bloopers, you know that my cats don't listen to not going up on the counters. So,
happens.
I'm safest if I cook my bread cubes in the oven. Then in a stovetop pot, you melt some butter and cook up your onions. I like it if there's some texture, so I do diced onions, not minced onions. You could do celery in here as well, but I'm allergic to celery, so we skip that. When I've made this up fresh, I've done pears or apples, but I'm not totally sure how that texturally would do with the freezing. So for the freezer version, I just do butter, onion, and more of those same seasonings. So sage, rosemary, oregano, salt, and pepper. And when your bread cubes come out of the oven or are fully dried on your counter, you're gonna mix together your dry bread cubes, that butter onion seasonings mixture, and you're gonna add chicken broth until it's not wet, but moist.
Yes, that's about right.
Get your air out and freeze this. Now, for the work that it is to make your mixture and dry your bread cubes out, you might as well, again, double this and get 2 or 3 or 4 bags in your freezer, depending on how big a crowd you're feeding during the holidays. And then you can have it for Christmas and Thanksgiving, or for, you know, if you're having a big roast dinner with your mashed potatoes and stuffing and all those things, Yorkshire pudding.
Charlotte doesn't eat the roast. She just wants to eat the Yorkshire pudding. It's funny.
True. Christy and I went on our way to the mountains a few years ago when we did a girls' trip.
Which was actually Thanksgiving.
It was Thanksgiving.
It was. We ditched our families on Thanksgiving weekend.
And when I came home, my husband made a full-ish Thanksgiving dinner just because I was feeling a little bit sad.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about him buying couches that you hated.
Oh, he did do that too.
He did do that, but that's another story for another day.
That is.
But he also painted. Like, you had a living room transformation.
When I go away that is really the only safe time to make changes because I'm not big on change. So when I go away, then my husband tends to paint. And this time, because he's colorblind, the paint color he chose and the couches he chose clashed. So anyway.
It couldn't be helped. But he did make a nice Thanksgiving dinner for you.
And he did all the work to paint and all that. So I appreciate it. I just haven't kept the couches in that room with the, orangey couch with green paint. No. So, all that to say that, where was I going with this? Oh yes, we were going on a trip.
Oh, right. We stopped at that cute little pub kind of place.
And they had Yorkshire puddings on the menu as an appetizers. They had 3 little mini Yorkshire puddings. And I love Yorkshire puddings, but I don't eat beef. And oddly enough, I will eat gravy that's made with beef, which I know makes absolutely no sense. But in my brain, somehow it works. So I asked if I could have it without the beef. And then Christy's like, no, get it with the beef and I'll eat your beef. So
it was delicious.
There you go. You got the beef benefit. I got the Yorkshire pudding and gravy. And all these years later, I still remember it. It was pretty good.
And that's why we're good friends. Because we can make it work.
She can eat my beef. I got a little sidetracked with the Yorkshire pudding.
It happens around here. I can't imagine why.
When you want to cook your stuffing, all you do is thaw it and transfer it into your casserole dish and bake it in the oven. Or you could even stuff your bird with it. You're just going to use this in whatever way you would regularly use your stuffing or dressing. So
that's it.
That's it.
This next recipe might not sound like your traditional side dish that you would have at a Thanksgiving dinner, but once you hear the ingredients, you will see how it could be kind of homey, kind of like the corn and jalapeno dish. It will be just one of those interesting things that starts to show up at Thanksgiving, and your kids will be like, it's not Thanksgiving unless we have sriracha roasted cauliflower on a sheet and chickpeas on a sheet pan.
That's right. It's going to sweep the nation.
It's going to sweep the nation. Okay, but so did you grow up going to Thanksgiving or Christmas meals where there was like a Waldorf salad or like some of the weird salads of the 70s?
Definitely.
My mother-in-law would make a wheat salad. And so she would soak the wheat and then it was in a cream sort of jellied
So there's
thing.
in traditional Ukrainian,
there's the wheat and
salad.
Honey.
Yeah. Okay,
that is not what this was. That wasn't what this was. And I've shown you before. I showed you in my Christmas video. She made my husband a handwritten cookbook of all their favorite family recipes. And it is in there. And I don't like the salad. She would always make it. Everybody would rave about it. And I felt bad because I couldn't rave about it. But, it was one of those things. So when I asked her to make the crepes, I said, or the wheat salad, because it's been a long time since anybody's had a chance to have it, because she doesn't host anymore, right? And so she chose to make the crepes, which I also didn't have. But it was nice of her to make them, and I was glad to have them there because it was part of the Thanksgiving tradition.
It's tradition.
And
in my husband's family, they have croquettes. He's Dutch. So his mom would make these croquettes, and one year I made them for my husband as a labor of love because
they are laborious.
My goodness, they took forever.
Yeah, and it's the dipping, right?
Yeah, because you're rolling them like you make the batter and you put it in the fridge to get cold enough so that it sticks together better, and then you bread it like you do an egg wash and then bread it, and then you freeze them you flash freeze them on a cookie sheet, and then you transfer them to freezer bags, and then on the day of, you deep fry these. Like so many holidays, my father-in-law would be out in the garage with the deep fryer because my mother-in-law didn't like the smell of the oil. So it's just, that's part of the tradition too, right?
Sure.
And that was one of those things, but they have beef and celery in them, so I've never had a croquette. I've just made them.
You are a good wife.
I didn't say I made them often. And that was sort of his Christmas gift that year.
That's a good one. That is a good one. I do the same thing for my husband with the
the Black Forest cake.
Black Forest cake. My mother-in-law has a home recipe for a Black Forest cake that my husband and his dad love. And I don't like the cherry. I'm so picky. We always joke about you being pickier, but really in so many ways I'm pickier. And I don't like cherries. I like them if I'm just eating cherries, but to have like canned cherries or cherry pie filling, which is in this cake, it's not my jam. I don't like cherry jam either. So make your traditions your own. Even if it's something a little bit weird, you can have a sriracha, cauliflower, and chickpea sheet pan, and it can be fall, it can be homey, and it is definitely delicious, and it can be a tradition. So go ahead and do the things that seem a little bit weird.
Because they are going to become next year's tradition, and before you know it, your kids are going to be asking, like, how come we didn't have the sriracha cauliflower dish this year?
Even better, they're going to leave home and they're going to phone home for the recipe. Mm-hmm. Like, I still phone my mom sometimes to get recipes for things, and she is tickled for it.
Oh, yeah.
Of course. I could Google it, but I'm going to phone my mom and ask her for the recipe. Of course.
We're never going to get to this recipe because we just keep going on. But funny story, I asked my mom for her shepherd's pie recipe because my mom always has made this shepherd's pie, and when our kids were young and I had so many and they were all so like little and I was so busy, sometimes my mom would make us a huge thing of shepherd's pie, and it would last us a few days. Even our whole family would last us a few days. And it was something where my husband liked it, the kids liked it, and she would even do it with a veggie beef so I could eat it.
Aww.
It was so nice of her. And so I asked her recently for that recipe because it would totally work as a freezer meal.
Absolutely.
And I thought we could put it in our repertoire here and share it with you. She doesn't know. She doesn't have a recipe. She
just made it happen.
But they tasted the same all the time, but she doesn't actually have any idea. So, someday maybe I'll have her make it, and then
we'll deconstruct it.
She'll figure it out, but we'll get you that recipe. And technically, it's a cottage pie because apparently shepherd's pie is only when it has lamb.
Yes, a cottage pie is with the beef. Okay. We use them kind of interchangeably here. Don't come at me, UK.
We do. Everyone that I've ever talked to here in Alberta, Canada, so not worldwide, but here, who talks about shepherd's pie is talking about a ground beef version or a stew meat version. They are not talking about lamb.
Yes, lamb isn't much of a thing here. That's all. Back to the recipe. We are going to get you the sriracha. I know you've been waiting with bated breath while we go through our stories about the sriracha cauliflower and chickpea sheet pan. So just hold your horses. We're going to do it right now. In a large freezer bag, we are going to separate and chop up a head of cauliflower and put in there. You can use frozen as well if you don't want to use fresh. That would be just fine. We are also going to add in a can of chickpeas that have been drained and rinsed, some olive oil, and salt and pepper. And that is everything for this bag. In a medium-sized freezer bag, we are going to put together some sriracha, some low-sodium soy sauce. And let me tell you, if Charlotte and I are telling you low-sodium soy sauce, it's for a reason. Use the low-sodium soy sauce. Regular soy sauce is going to be too salty for this recipe. A little bit of maple syrup, some apple cider vinegar, some minced ginger. So kind of like the garlic, we use squeezy tube ginger because it is fresh grated and it saves us from having to do that extra work. And we go through those pretty quickly. And a little bit of sesame oil and some chopped green onions. We're going to mix all that around in your medium-sized freezer bag. Remove excess air from both your bags, staple them together above the seal, and freeze. So on the day of cooking, we're going to empty the large bag on the sheet, on your baking sheet. Now you can use tin foil or some parchment paper in order to save yourself a little bit of cleanup in the end. And we are going to Bake that just with the large bag at 450 for 20 minutes. Then we're going to toss the vegetables and the chickpeas with the sauce from the medium bag and then throw it back under our broiler for another few minutes until it's crispy and golden and delicious.
So the reason I chose this for a holiday side dish video is, again, thinking about how your oven is often in use and so you don't want these recipes that need to cook for an hour or that need to take up a lot of space in your oven, like take a full casserole dish. This is a sheet pan, so you can have it on your lower oven or on your lower rack in the oven while something else is cooking on top, and it's like 26 minutes and the whole thing is done. Right. So it's one of those ones that would be pretty easy to cook up the day of, especially since you've already made it. Now, I know that my sweet potato recipe is in that other side dish video, and I do want you to go watch that anyway, because then you can get ideas and you can mix and match some things from this video and some things from that, and you can make your own holiday side dishes, which is exciting. But I feel like no holiday would be complete without my sweet potato casserole, so I'm gonna give it to you in this video as well. What you're gonna do is you're going to take your sweet potatoes and you're gonna keep the skin on them. You're gonna put some aluminum foil in the bottom of your oven to catch drips, and then turn your oven to 350 degrees. You're gonna place your sweet potatoes, depending on the size of them, you're gonna do like 3 or 4. And you're gonna place them directly on the rack. You're gonna cook them for about an hour, just until you can stick a fork in the center of the thickest one and you can see that it's soft enough. You're gonna pull the tin foil out of your oven and put it on your counter, and then you're going to take those sweet potatoes out and put them on the tin foil. Trust me on this, because this is gonna help you contain your mess. You're gonna wait for them to cool just a few minutes until you can touch them without burning yourself, and then you're going to open the skin up and scoop out what's inside of those sweet potatoes, which is now cooked, and put that into your casserole dish. Or if you're making it ahead, then you can, now when I make it ahead, usually I do it in foil casserole dishes, because then I can just put those directly into the oven on the day that I go to cook these, but you could do them in a bowl and transfer them into a freezer bag as well. Then you're going to add in some butter, a little bit of brown sugar, some pumpkin pie spice, Cajun seasoning, and if you like things spicy, you can also add some red chili flakes. Now with the pumpkin pie spice and the brown sugar, contrasting that Cajun seasoning and the chili flakes, you get that sweet and spicy, and it's just so, so good. So you're gonna mash that all together, and then, like I said, you can either put it in a freezer bag and get it in your freezer, or you can have it in a foil tray, cover it with a couple of layers of foil to prevent your freezer burn, or if it's gonna be in there for a few months, then I would lay a layer of plastic wrap directly on top of the sweet potato mixture and then put foil on top. Then you wanna add a note to yourself to remove the plastic wrap before baking, because we have made that mistake before.
We speak from experience.
We want to save you from making that mistake. So on the day you go to bake this, because you've got, you know, the sounds of Christmas or Thanksgiving, and you've got the smells and the people and all the things, and all that's missing is my sweet potato casserole. So you just thaw this, get it in your oven, and then you will have all the smells of the holidays, because then that starts wafting in. And it cooks for about an hour, so it's about the same as your stuffing, coincidentally, and they can both be in the oven at the same time. And there you have it. You just get a protein on there, and I have totally, instead of turkey, made one of our freezer meal salmons as our protein. So we've got you covered there too if you want. We're gonna put links in the description below to some of the recipes, to our Freezer Meals 101 club that has even more recipes, and where It just makes freezer cooking super easy for you. And to, what else did we say we were gonna link? Oh, to the other video about the side dishes down there. So you'll have everything that you need to make these holidays way less stressful so that you can enjoy time with your family and friends.
That sounds wonderful. Thanks so much for watching today, and we hope that you have a wonderful Thanksgiving and a very Merry Christmas. It feels really weird to say that this early, but we wanted to have this video to you in time so that you can be prepared for those things. So maybe if you're watching in December, you are planning Christmas, and we are glad that you were here with us.
Happy cooking and happy holidays.